Hey everyone, Thornton here, and as most of you are aware, there is a brand new Star Wars game coming out by Respawn, which is going to be an FPS Mandalorian style game. However, this is going to be published once again by EA, and unfortunately, EA has left some of their other Star Wars projects to die. One of the most notable ones was Star Wars Battlefront 1 and 2, and today we're going to cover the rise and fall and how EA truly did kill off this franchise, but there might be hope for their other games coming. But without further ado, let's jump into today's topic. Our story begins a long time ago in a game studio far, far away, known as Pandemic, which in 2002 had begun development in collaboration with LucasArts on a brand new game titled Star Wars Battlefront. Greg Burrard, who was an executive producer on the game, stated, "We wanted to create an online shooter for the Xbox, PS2, PC, which would allow for team strategy and would feature battles and worlds from every one of the 6 Star Wars films." As in this timeline, the abomination of the Disney trilogy had not yet been created. The goal was simple: create a video game within the Star Wars universe with a first and third person perspective unlike the galaxy had ever seen, and the idea was simple enough, but would need certain gameplay elements and a variety to keep the game fresh. And so the game allowed for 4 different factions to be played from both the original and prequel trilogies. You had the Galactic Republic, the CIS, and from the prequel era, the Rebel Alliance and Galactic Empire. In each faction, 5 different classes of the characters would become available, with 4 main classes such as infantry, heavy weapon, pilot, and sniper, while the 5th would be unique to that specific faction. And each one would have a non-playable hero character such as Count Dooku, Mace Windu, Skywalker, and Darth Vader. And the gameplay in Battlefront was to be conquest based, making for an easy comparison to modern day Battlefield games, but with a Star Wars skin over it. Each faction had a finite amount of reinforcements, and each is given control of a set number of command posts in a given level. The object is you gotta either eliminate enemy forces or capture and hold all the command posts simultaneously for 20 seconds. This also allowed for you to have several ground and air vehicles that you could play as, featuring the hulking AT&Ts to the fast speeder bikes, and would be dependent on the level you're playing from, and there were over 16 of them, ranging from Bespin, Endor, Hoth, and so many more. But best of all, during this time, games were sold as complete full packages. There were no microtransactions, limited DLC, and therefore the single player experience of this game was truly allowed to shine. It would feature 3 modes: a campaign mode, where there would be several battles together in a set order loosely based on the historical campaign of either the Clone Wars or the Galactic Civil War. As Episode 3 had not been released at the time, the Clone War campaigns actually ends with the Battle of Kashyyyk, and there were cutscenes from the footage of the 5 films that were released between battles. Of course, if you just wanted to hop in and slaughter some AI, that was an option too, with the instant action mode, which allowed for you to customize a full list of battles with all the different maps you could choose, and there were even mod tools when the game released from the developers that allowed the community to really make this game their own. And finally, there was the Galactic Conquest, which in my opinion is one of the best game modes in a Star Wars game, or really any game out there. In the Galactic Conquest mode, the player would use strategy to take control of planets and dominate an area of the galaxy. First, the player would choose a map configuration based on the conflicts from both eras of Star Wars histories. Some maps would start evenly while others favor one faction. Next, the player chooses which faction to play as. The game is played in turns. It's very similar to Risk, but overall it was an incredibly fun and engaging game mode that you could play for hours on end. When I look back at this game, which released in 2004, it truly makes me sad, as modern day releases almost never come with this amount of content on release, and with nothing held back to be later released as DLC. Due to the large scope of the game, the Star Wars title, and the amazing variety found within it, there was no surprise that by 2007, Star Wars Battlefront would sell over 4 million copies, and to this day holds scores at Metacritic of 76, 82, and 80 for the PC, PlayStation 2, and Xbox versions. So without much hesitation, a year later, Pandemic Studios and LucasArts would announce they would begin development on Star Wars Battlefront 2 with some slight changes. The gameplay would remain faithful to what had made the first so successful. The first change would be that in Battlefront 2, it would make the heroes, which had formerly been non-playable characters, into legends you could play on the battlefield after scoring a number of points, allowing you to play as your favorite character from Star Wars as you destroyed all those who stood before you like some younglings. Battlefront 2 would also expand and go in depth for the campaign mode, retelling portions of the Star Wars story from the point of view of a veteran clone Imperial stormtrooper reminiscing about his tour of duty in service for both the Galactic Republic and the Galactic Empire as you play through 6 of the pre-sequels and original trilogies. The game would also expand, allowing for 24 different maps instead of the previous 16, along with the instant mode and new game modes such as Capture the Flag, Hero Assault, Space Assault, allowing for space dogfights, which was a staple of the Star Wars universe. Once again though, the crown jewel of the game was Galactic Conquest, and the upgrade from the original Battlefront was that you would now be able to play cooperatively with a friend
friend or play against them in a competitive mode. Battlefront 2 took everything from the first game, which was already amazing in its own right, and expanded on it in a way we often don't see with video game sequels. The team at Pandemic wanted to make a truly great Star Wars title, and by all accounts they did, as the game would release in 2005, the same development year that it was announced, and by 2007 had sold 6 million copies and was praised as one of the greatest Star Wars games to have ever been released. After the release of the two critically acclaimed Star Wars games, fans began clamoring for the third installment. There was one issue, however. Pandemic Studios was undergoing a power struggle as a giant juggernaut known as EA purchased the studio in 2007 for $860 million. That's right, you thought EA only had a hand in the poor recent Star Wars Battlefront titles? Nah. They bought Pandemic, mismanaged the studio, and eventually in November of 2009, 2 years after Pandemic Star Wars Battlefront 2, EA would lay off 1,500 people and absorb the remaining 35 employees into EA. Thanks, you assholes. However, LucasArts was not going to stop there. They reached out to studio Free Radical to begin development on Star Wars Battlefront 3. We would never see this title published due to a falling out between LucasArts and Free Radical, which has always been a little murky. Some say LucasArts sabotaged the studio financially. Well, an anonymous LucasArts employee stated, "I was at LucasArts during this time, working on Battlefront 3, and remember it well. Everybody from producers, marketing was 100% invested in making this relationship work. We are desperate for a next-gen follow-up to Battlefront, and the idea that the project was sabotaged for financial reasons is ludicrous. The franchise was a huge moneymaker at the time." When Free Radical continually missed dates and deliveries, Jim Ward and Daryl Rodriguez made many goodwill, whole or partial milestone payments to keep the project going. Unfortunately, the project was canceled. There is footage online that did surface. It looks as if Battlefront 3 would have had a much larger focus on the story. While previous entries had single-player components, they were typically just recounting famous Star Wars battles. In Battlefront 3, Free Radical was clearly trying to do their own thing. Much of the gameplay focuses on two never-before-seen characters, one Jedi and one clone, and cutscenes with full motion capture were included. It's impossible to know where Free Radical was headed with the story, but the fact that it's even there in the first place is unexpected. All of this left a very dark time in the galaxy. There would be no new Star Wars Battlefront games, and Star Wars fans would search Google and the HoloNet for any glimpse of a new project underway for the franchise. Then, news finally did break out, and the galactic empire known as Disney would be acquiring Lucasfilm for $4 billion in 2012, and just like that, many voices cried out into the darkness. Nah, I'm just kidding. People were actually pretty stoked because it seemed like more Star Wars content, but as we all will learn, that's not always a good thing. In May 2013, publisher Electronic Arts obtained exclusive rights to develop Star Wars games for gaming consoles, and its subsidiaries DICE, Visceral Games, and BioWare started working on Star Wars games after LucasArts was shut down. DICE first acknowledged the game at EA's press conference in 2013, along with a teaser trailer, and the game was going to be built with the Frostbite 3 engine. And the studio head Patrick Suderlund stated that the game would be DICE's interpretation of what Battlefront should be, which seemed like a natural fit at the time, as DICE's Battlefield series had a lot of comparisons with Battlefront with the large-scale battles, the vehicles, and seemed like an easy transition for this team. In 2015, the game would release, and there was some positives for its visuals, music, technical aspects, and high production values. However, shiny make a game good, it does not. There was a massive lack of content at launch in both single and multiplayer modes, and would promote a seasonal pass model unlike prior Battlefront games. Let me first address the issues of single players. Could you play a single player experience with a friend and mindlessly shoot enemies in small areas? Yeah, you could, but that was about it. The game includes cooperative missions which can be played offline, but excludes a campaign mode. Players can complete the missions both independently and or with bots. Cool, I guess. The game took a major step back from the campaign aspects, which was a high selling point of Battlefront 2, and the Galactic Conquest mode, which personally I'll never forgive them for. The emphasis of this game all came in the form of multiplayer because hey, that's the best place to sell microtransactions, right? It featured a number of modes such as Walker Assault, Fighter Squadron, Blast, Supremacy, Hero Hunt, Heroes vs Villains, and Cargo. And I know I keep bringing it up, but damn EA, you couldn't throw Galactic Conquest as a multiplayer mode? What the hell? Critics gave mixed reviews for great graphics and gunplay, but a lack of content. Fans of the series felt as though they had been massively ripped off, and this was just a Star Wars skin over a Battlefield game with a huge lack of content. Regardless, the game would go on to be the 4th fastest selling title of 2015, and had shipped 14 million copies by May of 2016, mostly I think due to the name brand of Star Wars. On May 10th, 2016, 2016, the development of Star Wars Battlefront 2 was announced, once again led by DICE, with Motive Studios being responsible for the single-player campaign as they realized the massive mistake of their first attempt at Battlefront, and Criterion Games responsible for the Starfighters gameplay and mechanics. This game would also feature content from the sequel trilogy of films from Disney. Creative director Bernard Diemer has stated that the company has replaced the Season Pass system of paid expansion of content because that system was determined to have fragmented the player community of the 2015 predecessor game. The new expansion system is designed to allow all players to play longer. Remember this quote, "It's gonna bite them in the ass." The multiplayer of the game was successful, having a number of different classes and factions all unique to the Star Wars universe and building upon the mechanic of DICE's first attempt at Battlefront. No complaint there from the maps and visuals, as they were beautiful and played incredibly well, along with hero classes that were introduced as opposed to the bonus in the last game, which was a welcomed change. I'm still pissed though, no Galactic Assault, like come on, just put it in the game. They would also realize the mistake of no campaign and rectify that issue with this follow-up where you would play as a member of the Empire Iden Verso, who as the story would progress would be captured by the rebellion, and you would flip sides and run along famous characters such as Luke Skywalker, and then you would time jump 30 years to blend into the Disney trilogy. The campaign was fine, it didn't come close to the story of the 501st Legion as we saw in the original Battlefront 2, but it was still better than nothing. Though there were a number of upgrades, there was a looming darkness over the game. During pre-release beta trials, the game's publisher EA was criticized by gamers and the gaming press for introducing a loot box monetization scheme that gave players substantial gameplay advantage through items purchased in-game with real money. You know, everyone's favorite mechanic. Pay to win. Responding to the controversy, developers had adjusted the number of in-game items a player receives through playing the game. However, after the game went into pre-release, a number of players and journalists who received the copy of the game reported various controversial gameplay features, such as rewards being unrelated to the player's performance in the game. On November 12, 2017, a Reddit user complained that although they spent $80 to purchase the deluxe edition of the game, Darth Vader remained inaccessible for play, and the use of this character required a large amount of in-game credits. Players did the math and found that it would take 40 hours of grinding to accumulate enough credits to unlock everyone's favorite villain, Darth Vader. In response to the community's backlash, EA's community team defended the controversial changes by saying their intent to make users earn credits to unlock heroes was to give users a sense of pride and accomplishment after unlocking a hero. Thus, an entire meme was born, and EA quickly surged to the top of the most hated gaming companies. Due to the backlash the day before release, EA disabled microtransactions entirely, citing players' concerns that they gave buyers unfair advantages. They stated their intent to reintroduce them at a later date after unspecified changes had been made. To put this into perspective, they pissed off so many people that the government of Belgium decided this was also gambling and made entire laws about the way EA was putting loot boxes in games. Also, go Belgium. I'll buy some chocolates to celebrate the balls y'all have. Despite all this, the game was nominated for Best Shooter, Best Graphics, and Best Multiplayer. Though it wasn't perfect, DICE had definitely built a solid game and one that was much more enjoyable than its predecessor, and through a number of DLC updates such as the Rise of Skywalker and the original trilogy updates, the game, dare I say, actually became good. It only took DICE 4 years of development, going through EA nearly destroying the integrity of gaming and its fan base, and government regulation to fix it. However, not all stories end with the Jedi putting an end to the Sith. In November, DICE would put out Battlefield 2042, which flopped harder than balls on a hot summer day. With DICE in complete disarray and EA losing the exclusivity on the Star Wars title, Battlefront 3 would be deemed cancelled and no longer a product DICE would be working on. Instead, EA would have their studio Respawn, which had created Titanfall and Apex Legends and the amazing Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, to begin production on 3 new Star Wars games, none of which were Battlefront 3. Luckily, due to EA's horrible mismanagement of the license, they would lose that exclusivity that they had from Disney, as the contract was not renegotiated. This has allowed a number of new Star Wars games to begin development, from the amazing Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, a personal favorite of mine which is now having a remake done by Aspyr, to LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Trilogy, which just released and is utterly fantastic. No studio has yet to announce production or development on a new Battlefront franchise, and with EA shutting down Pandemic and ruining DICE, we may never see a game that matches the intensity and love of the originals, but at least we can be thankful for what Pandemic gave us.
Let me know down below, what are your guys' thoughts on the future of Star Wars? Do you think EA should no longer have any involvement whatsoever, or do you think that they've redeemed themselves by having Respawn work on Star Wars Jedi Survivor and this possibly new Mandalorian game? Also, if you guys are looking for more information on video game news, I cover it right here and here. One of them is even about the new Mandalorian game if you wanted details on it. And until next time, everyone, thanks for stopping by. I'll see you in the next video.